Hi, in this video I'd like to talk to you about diffusion. So diffusion is the idea of separating yourself from your thoughts or from the belief in your thoughts. So to talk about diffusion, we first need to talk about fusion, or in this case, cognitive fusion. This is a concept that comes from acceptance and commitment therapy and essentially means that you start believing your thoughts are true or that they are actions that must be taken. So when you believe I'm really, really bad because it's a thought that's occurring in your head, this is an example of cognitive fusion. And what defusion attempts to do is create some separation between those thoughts and yourself. So in other words, you're hearing them just as noise or as background images and thoughts rather than something you have to act upon. This relies very heavily on the concept of self as context, which you can read a lot about. There's some really good information on self as context in lots of great books on ACT, including The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. So let's talk about some ways that we can get a little space between who we are and what we are thinking. So a brief distinction, we want to talk about thoughts or kind of sound-based mental activity as one component. We'll just call these thoughts, and then images as a separate group. And the reason being is that how we diffuse from these two things is going to be a little bit different based on the format they come into. Okay? So when it comes to thoughts, the first thing that Stephen Hayes advocates is the idea of singing a song, or as I might call it, musical thoughts. Stephen Hayes, for lack of a better example, always picks Happy Birthday in his examples. So in this case, if you're thinking about the tune Happy Birthday, and then you start going along with whatever the thought is. So if, for example, it's I'm really, really bad, it might be I'm really, really bad. I'm really, really bad. I'm really, really bad. I'm really, really bad. Now that's obviously not exactly the right tune, but hopefully you get my point. The second one, which is a personal favorite of mine, is the idea of silly voices. And this is repeating the thought in a way that makes it a little bit comical, a little bit absurd, and once again creates some of that space. Stephen Hayes does a really great Donald Duck that you should watch one of his TED Talks in here. It's amazing. Other versions might be Mickey Mouse, Goofy, something else that works best for you. I personally do an absolutely terrible impersonation of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and because it's so bad, in fact, that my wife even is like, that's not at all what he sounds like. But the really cool part is because that's not what he sounds like, it makes it even better for creating space. So if we're talking about the idea of this is never going to work, or a thought that occurs in my head sometimes when I'm trying something is this is never going to work, it sounds like, this is never going to work. And it just creates an absurdity there. There's a lot of space, and it kind of may even get you laughing at the idea of just how ridiculous this thought is, and then create some space to start working at it and viewing it objectively. Another one that Stephen Hayes comes out with that I think is really brilliant is the idea of repetition. So all of ACT is based on this concept of the relational frame theory. Look it up. It's a fairly interesting concept, but it basically boils down to we associate words with things, and words are not their things, and etc. That's extremely dumbed down, but you can do some more reading. But for our purposes, what we can do is start repeating a word over and over and over again at a fairly quick tempo, and it actually causes us to lose the connection between what the word means and the actual thing behind it. An example Stephen Hayes does with milk. Another one, let's say for example we're still on this subject of being really bad at something. We might take the word bad and just repeat it over and over again. Bad, 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 so on and so forth. And eventually what you'll notice is that the mind kind of starts to lose its interest in that word, and you might notice that it starts to sound funny, or it might start to sound kind of ridiculous. And that just helps break a little bit of that association and create a little bit more space. When it comes to the idea of images, there are a couple of other techniques we can use to work with images. One that I'm a big fan of is the idea of captioning or recaptioning a particular situation. So for example, I can envision, or a vision that comes up sometimes when I'm doing a presentation, is the idea of everybody falling asleep. So the caption that I might put on that, just kind of by default, is this: I'm completely boring and nobody ever will listen to me, that everybody's going to fall asleep. But what I can do is take that image and then recaption it and say, world's greatest insomnia treatment found. And this is so much more positive, and it's a little absurd, creates a little bit more space to work with. Another one that I think is really interesting is the idea of taking that image, whatever it may be. If you're afraid of flying, maybe it's a plane crash. If you're afraid of, spiders, it's a giant spider, what have you. And imagine it on someone's t-shirt, or maybe it's even a tattoo they're getting. Or it's a billboard that's out there that people can look at. And just by getting that image out of your head and into the world, it can create a little bit of that space that we need in order to create some separation. So hopefully these techniques are useful to you. Please take and try them out in your life and see how maybe you can get a little space and work better with your mind. I hope this has been of use. Thank you for watching, and look forward to talking to you soon.